All right, people, we're in the last third of the season. We've only got 2 episodes left after tonight's episode, season 3, episode 7, entitled Too Much Birthday. Dustin, Kendall's 40, which is baffling to me, to say the least. I'm going to get into that once we get started on this episode. You got anything to say before we get started?
Hey, it's Greg, the snitch bitch.
All of that and more. Stay tuned. Dustin, can we just talk about for a second before we get started that Kendall Roy is 40 years old? Like, I don't know. I've always had this weird thing with millennials where, for whatever reason, because like the 2010s is like the decade where I came of age and like started to like recognize like what was going on in the world just in general. And I don't know. So and because like I became aware that like, okay, millennials are roughly a decade older than us. Just about. We were both born in the 90s. Millennials are typically born somewhere usually between it's like 78 and like 80 and like 90. I think 95 is like the cutoff for millennials. But like I always think of like most millennials as having been born pretty much in the 80s. And so they're constantly in kind of like a permanent standstill of 30, right? In my mind. And now they're entering their 40s.
All these ones confuse me, dude. Like, because like I've seen like 3 different fucking breakdowns of this shit. Yeah. Or it's like, oh, you're Gen Z. I've thought I'm Gen Z, a millennial, and Gen X, like in 3 different charts. I don't even know.
You're definitely not Gen X. I can tell you that.
I know that. But like I saw a chart once.
You know what's confusing? It's the problem is that the cutoff to transition years are always weird. So exactly. if my understanding is correct, Gen Z officially begins with my year, 97. 97 is like definitively the first year of Gen Z.
I'm a millennial now.
The problem is that the definitive cutoff and really end of millennials is technically 94. So 95 and 96 is in like that weird. I know, trust me, it's stupid. It makes no sense. But it's the same thing, right?
That's why I've been confused there.
It's the same thing, right, with the transition from Gen X to millennials, because Gen X technically ends with 1980. That's technically the last year of Gen Xers. But you talk to anybody born between like 79 and 80, they act like millennials. They don't act like Gen Xers, as far as what we come to understand. And so I think, honestly, that's like kind
of the years 1979 and the year 1980.
The year 1979 and the year 1980 are both technically Gen X years. Generation Y, which is millennials, technically begins 1981. That's officially the first year for millennials.
And on December, so
yeah, exactly. So
it's even more confusing.
Yeah,
but, yeah, I guess I'm a millennial.
Well, it's taken a lot of years of research in order to realize it, and I feel like it's the perfect spot to pick up because like Kendall is literally like the ideal millennial in the sense that like he is constantly having identity crises all over the place. He is constantly looking for validation that he will never get. He feels like he is constantly striving for something that it feels like he just can never have. And this episode is like the defining moment for it because like we've been talking all season about like kind of when is Kendall going to reach his breaking point? Like there's no way he can do this false bravado for this long, and especially after like kind of the disappointing setbacks that he suffered in last episode. And like this is kind of like his last hoorah. This is like his last chance to like show it's like, yeah, I'm actually worth something with this ridiculous gonzo thing that he's doing for his 40th. What was the stunt that he was going to do originally before he called that off? He was going to do like he comes out nailed to a cross singing Honesty by Billy Joel.
Yeah, it was going to be like a wire work thing, and then it was going to transition into like a dance number with this fucking like Wu-Tang Clan,
right? The Wu-Tang,
but it's kids.
Yeah,
but it's like kids. I really wanted to see all of that. Yeah. Too, so I just want to say my only flaw with this episode. It's my only flaw is the fact that we didn't get to see any crazy shit on like stage because like you can't just like tease in the promo him with a microphone and he doesn't rap, right? You know what I mean? Like he sings for 10 seconds, right? So oddly,
like the opening scene of the episode opens like doing the honesty bit. Besides the fact that like Jeremy Strong, incredible pipes too, as if like he didn't need more reasons for him to win the Emmy. But it was like a little bit of a tease, but like it's one of those things where it's like again, I attribute this more to an HBO thing than a Succession thing originally because I've seen this on other HBO shows before where they're like, oh, we gotta do the twist, we gotta do the sudden reversal, last minute switch of like, oh, you thought you were gonna get this one thing, but you're gonna get not. It's like, oh, you thought Tony was gonna kill Richie, nope, it's gonna be Janice. The HBO loves doing that shit. But in this episode, which I should also admit is their second celebrity guest director of the season, we had Kathy Yan, who, ironically enough, too, you said it was between this and episode 3 for your favorite episode of the season, both directed by the celebrity directors, because Kathy
and
Yan,
both women. So stop
there you
calling
go.
me a misogynist, internet.
There you go.
I
Exactly.
love women.
Exactly. Yeah, Kathy Yan directed episode 3, The Disruption, which we both talked about, was like previously like possibly our like one of the best episode of the season. I really liked episode 5, and I also really liked last episode. But this episode, dude,
hasn't been a bad episode yet.
No, in my opinion, there's not a bad episode of Succession. But
not yet.
This for my money, this is my favorite episode of the season. I don't know what's gonna happen in the last 2 episodes, but for me, easily, this is gotta be my favorite episode of the season. Just everything that I've wanted from an episode of Succession, kind of, right? Because this always happens just with TV in general, right? You have the build up from the first episode, and you're waiting for the breaking, and the breaking point of the characters. A lot of people usually associate that with usually the penultimate episodes, right? Usually the last 2 of a season. That usually, though, I found that isn't always the case, right? You usually like reach some sort of a breaking point, and then you have the last couple of episodes in order to kind of wrap it up. You know, sometimes it happens in the middle of the season, sometimes it happens in like the last quarter of the season before you get to the last couple of episodes. But this was definitely this was definitely Kendall's breaking point, to say the least. And I think that they captured it beautifully in a way that only Succession can. Just general, I don't know. Talk about your general thoughts on this episode before we actually start breaking it down, like as far as what happened.
I thought it was great. Yeah, like you said, like I'm really right now I have it above 3 for as my favorite of the season so far. But knowing this show and knowing that the last 2 episodes of each season are like bangers, so like I'm still like holding out for like the number 1 spot being one of those 2, because some crazy shit I think is going to happen. And this episode definitely teased it. We got Alexander Skarsgard for the first time. That was great. Just saying briefly things before we go into everything. I love everything that they're doing with Tom. That performance is still one of the most original things that's ever been on television. And I love the whole scope and the look of the episode. The production design was outstanding. It's another Emmy it should probably get if they even do that for certain episodes. Because come on, it just looks amazing. That treehouse shit that they were like, it was awesome.
The emergence of like through their mom's vagina or whatever it was that they said when they first walked in.
I know.
Yeah,
I feel like I've seen that kind of gag before in a movie where it's like they go in through a vagina. I feel like I've seen that in something, but it was still funny in this episode. It was funny. Don't get me wrong. Like, it was fun, and it was definitely like a psychologically weird thing to just think about, you know. And like from Kendall's perspective, why did he want that? That's fun. And then we'll talk about like his kind of like breakdown, why we don't see certain things happen in the episode, but like I loved it. I thought it was terrific. All the siblings are great and like doing something terrific on this episode, even if they're not in it a lot. Like everyone, all the siblings are like, this is one of the strongest episodes because it makes the siblings have like a point and a purpose in the episode, and they all have a moment to shine individually more than usual. And I think it was just a really terrific episode.
Yeah, it's been an interesting season in the sense that we haven't gotten, obviously just because of the nature of what's been going on this season, we haven't gotten too many scenes of the siblings kind of all together in one room. I guess kind of that's why like the scene in episode 2 was so surprising when you saw the siblings get together. I'm like, wow, they kind of feel like they're getting together a little bit too soon after Kendall's big revelation there. But like, it's been like, so I still remember some of my favorite moments in season 1 back when I was first getting like introduced to the show was seeing kind of like the siblings interact. Like one of my favorite episodes from season 1. It's ironic because I feel like there's a lot of like kind of odes to that in this episode is the Prague episode, Tom's bachelor party, just kind of like seeing them all hang together in this one setting kind of, and then all dispersed for like this one big, like it's weird where it's like they're in this kind of enclosed confined setting, but it still feels expansive. It still feels like there's so much going on. You know, that's kind of like you know, they talk about this a lot on like, you know, on the Ringer Network with their Succession recap episodes, is how Succession kind of each episode feels like its own strange bottle episode in a way, because they almost never leave one location. And in a way that kind of like is what perfectly situates it to be like the perfect ideal COVID shooting show, is because most of the time they're not traveling to multiple locations within one episode, usually. You know, they're kind of like always in this one instance. And the fun of the show, more so than anything else, is seeing the characters interact off each other. And it feels like we get that in this episode in a way that we really haven't in the last couple episodes, because they've been so focused on just damage control and trying to save the company. You know, oh, the shareholder meeting. Oh, we got to decide the next president of the United States. You know, yada, 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 this. And, you know, the show to me is at its best when it's having the characters just beef off one another. I think that's why season 2 is still so rich, is because we saw them together in so many different settings. The other reason why this is my favorite episode, in addition to us getting all that back, is that after 2 episodes where Kendall was kind of on the back burner a little bit, right? Obviously, after having such a strong, like, kind of, you know, impetus and role in the show for the first 3 episodes, then you had obviously the Brody episode for episode 4, which is kind of like, still to my knowledge, the only episode where him and Logan have had any real interaction this entire season. And then you had the next 2 episodes after that where it's like, you know, them kind of, you know, the disaster of the shareholders meeting, and then, you know, them picking the president of the United States, and Kendall just kind of like realizing that he's run out of options. And so this episode, we focus back in on him, but the thing that the thing that completely like solidifies it is that this is kind of Kendall's reckoning with both himself, with everything that he's been trying to do this season, with everything that he's trying to accomplish, with like, it's like his understanding as a person. Like, the thing that I love too about Strong's performance in this episode, if we're kind of isolating it, like within each episode of its own, is that this is the episode where we finally saw a break. You know, he's had like such this facade up throughout this entire season of like, I know what I'm doing, even when everyone is telling me, and even when I kind of don't realize that I don't know what I'm doing. Because you have those moments, right, when you have like a character, just a person who is so sure of themselves, even if everyone is telling them that they're crazy, and then even they start to not necessarily, you know, they start to lose faith in themselves, but then they have to like kind of convince themselves, like, no, we have to still maintain the facade, even if I don't believe it. And you just saw like every different facet of that. Like, it's funny because Bill Simmons said something earlier, like before the start of the season came out, when he was ranking his 25 favorite Succession characters, and he was talking about how he personally thought that Jeremy Strong was the best performance ever done on an HBO show ever. And I'm like, better than first of all, like, better than Gandolfini on Sopranos was a tough act to follow, but you know, and obviously everything that Dinklage did on Game of Thrones, but I'm like, just the gamut of emotions that Strong has to demonstrate here, like how he's king of the world one minute, how he's throwing shit at his siblings the next, you know, but in his mind it's just playful jabbing, then the next, like, just having to portray like utterly broken and seemingly almost out of nowhere, and then just like the interactions that he bounces off of them, when obviously with the treehouse stuff, and like it's so unbelievable to me how it's like 1 minute he goes from like just throwing shit at his siblings to literally like not letting them, doing something so petty and childish as not letting them into his quote unquote childhood treehouse because they're trying to pull off a deal that he kind of spearheaded the effort of. And we'll get into that in a little bit, because I do want to talk to you about that, like whether like if this ties into Walter at all, as far as like, you know, the Mattson pursuit just in general, because that's kind of the B plot of this episode, is that the DOJ investigation is kind of, you know, winding down, and what's called Waystar is finally attempting their next big acquisition in the wake of the Pierce failure last season, in the form of GoJo, which is a tech thing. Who knows? Like, they're really ambiguous about what these companies actually produce, which I think is kind of fascinating and funny, and just more the brilliance of the show. Which of course it brings us into the next of, for me personally, there were a lot of celebrity guests that were introduced this season, but the second of my 2 most anticipated people that I was looking forward to, first being Adrian Brody, the second being Alexander Skarsgard's Lukas Mattson. We finally got him in this episode. Yes. And then how Kendall goes from that to literally just, you know, gets set up by one comment from Rava about his kids giving him a birthday gift. And then when he can't find it, he ultimately just has this breakdown about how his siblings don't value him as a person, and that they only came to his birthday party before, you know, for business reasons. Ultimately, like Dustin, do you think that they could have pulled this off in any other show? Like, because I feel like any other show, this would have been an absolute nightmare just to pull off, and it would have made ultimately no sense.
It would come off as like a farce, and like this is like grounded in like its own reality so beautifully. And yeah, I really want to talk about that. That's really the only moment of the episode that really turned me off, was the Rava moment, because she has a line like,
she sucks.
Yeah, and she has a line.
She's an awful character.
Yeah, and she has a line like, "Oh yeah, I just wanted to come before like you know, the party starts," or something. You know, she insinuates like before he's like gets high.
Every other line that she has, she's insinuating something to not really to throw a jab at Kendall, but like to fuck with him, you know, because there's a difference, right? You're between her throwing a jab and like her fucking with him, because you can tell that her fucking with him like gets to him like way more so than like, because that's what Logan does. That's why Logan has been able to like have the hold on him that he has throughout the entire run of the show, is because Logan doesn't just straight up like demean and humiliate him, right? He does that, but then he fucks with his head. He messes around with his head. It's why Kendall is so screwed up as a character. And to see that come from Rava consistently, on top of the fact that Rava's already the most underwritten and underdeveloped character of this entire show, like that to me is like what just defines her as like just primarily unlikable.
Yeah, and I'm just curious. I was thinking the whole episode, like, as soon as she said that, I was like, yeah, they're not going to find that fucking gift, are
Nope.
they? They're not.
Nope.
And, like, as soon as they started showing him, like, you know, looking for it, and, like, no one can find it in this whole fucking extravagant party, I'm thinking two things. One, was there even a gift?
Exactly.
And two, if there was and you really can't find it, I would, like... get some video footage up. Get some, like, try to find it. Like, fucking find it then. Like, and
yeah.
I don't even know if there was one though. And rabbit gift, the way she was describing the gift wrap too was like very vague. So it's like, I don't know if there even was a gift.
Yeah.
Which is like a strange wrench to just throw into this fucking story. And it just kind of, that's the only thing that kind of derailed the episode for me, which was otherwise like a perfect episode.
Well, what's interesting about that is that he becomes so obsessed with finding it that we become obsessed with finding it. It's amazing how it pulls it off, where the show is literally, he's just in that pile of presents, just going through and and Naomi finally also, that's another thing that this episode gets props for, is finally giving Naomi a reason for being here, which for the first couple episodes of the season, it's like, why is this character here? You know, cool, she's awesome. It's nice to have like somebody who seems to genuinely like being with Kendall, not just to take advantage of him, which is super nice, but it's like, why is this character here? And her like kind of like coaxing him and like being a source of comfort that really like he's never had before. You know, it's kind of, I think it's kind of fascinating too how this kind of like goes along with Roman, who I think is the other like kind of like underlying factor here. Like this is just Roman unleashed this episode too, as far as like his connection with the Skarsgard. Like we'll talk about that in a little bit, but like when you see like him just going through, you're like, it's crazy. I love when HBO shows can do this, where like they're rooting you, they build all this tension and they have you so rooting for such a mundane task, and then at the end, it's not until then you realize it's like, oh no, they're again, after you're the idea of the present not even being there is not even on your mind until after the episode is done. And like that speaks to like just the level of thought that is put into this, you know?
And they never like hinted where it even was, right? The gift,
exactly.
Like they never had a shot.
Like Rava feels like she's being intentionally vague about the location of the gift, to the point like, again, I feel like these are Kendall's kids, you know, and like there's never been a situation where like she would kind of use them as weapons against him. So the fact that she kind of like just says that, it seems just so clueless as to the location.
Oh, and she mentions that like, oh, they're spying on the maid, by the way, and getting info.
Right.
And by the way, I know you're yelling at the kids, or like go fuck yourself.
I don't understand her. I legitimately do not understand her character.
And then she's really like, I don't mean to sour this party. And he's like, well, you kind of did. Right. So it's like,
right. And then like, that's the beginning of Kendall's breakdown as far as him being like back and forth. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm sorry. But at the same time, you know, fuck you, because you're being intentionally bitchy. And like, I like him like finally standing up to her and not just being like kind of like withholding to be like decent to her because they were once married and had kids together, when he realizes it's like, no, this is, you know, I need to be on my A game. And it reflects in the rest of his interactions, obviously, you know, when he brings the rest of the siblings into the room, where he kind of like shows like the articles that he's made up for them, which were genuinely funny. Like I feel like Connor's reaction to that, like I don't know, like, but you think Connor was like being like a little bit too literal, or like I don't know, like Connor was the only instance where like I really like, this is probably like the most that I've enjoyed like their usage of Connor for the like since the first season. And I don't know, I just felt like his kind of overreaction to that. It's like, wow.
No, it revealed something about his character, because like, yeah, I mean, it was a joke. I mean, I don't think it was very serious, and I don't think any of them think he could be president, but he thinks he could be president, and he has like, what did he say? Like, 4 million followers now. So like, but he was more upset about the shit in the bag thing, because the reason he shit the bag on the camping trip is because Logan Roy couldn't be bothered to take them camping, and he was stuck with them, and like he ate bad fish, so he had to shit in a bag. You know what I mean? I thought that was such a great moment, and maybe his Emmy clip. I don't know.
Maybe a low key like great Connor episode too, because like the whole thing is that
Connor,
I
mean. Yeah, it is.
Well, yeah, because Connor's floated kind of through the first 2.5 seasons of the show, like with practically showing off like none of like the residual damage that the other 3 siblings have, like none of the insecurities, none of like the need for validation, none of that stuff. And this is really the first episode of that comes. And the strange part is that it comes seemingly from a genuine place where it's like, wow, I'm like the only one that was like actually like trying to like be genuine with you guys for your entire life, and now you're just using that as a weapon against me. Wow, it just goes to show, And so I think that was probably like really, really fascinating, and like maybe shows is like, wow, maybe there is more to this guy than just like him kind of like being just like the residual joke character, It's really, really interesting. Like I'm really hoping that like they use this in order to like kind of spin it off and like really give Connor something interesting to do, and they don't just use it as like another instance. It's like, oh, now he's gonna stop being president. Up now, now he doesn't have to bankroll Willa's play. Also, Willa, low key like a power player this episode. Like just finally, like just straight up there, just like defending Connor every chance he gets. What about the line where he's like, oh, you're not taking my coat because what is it? I once trusted a fur coat in Vancouver and I never got it back. I thought that was funny. Also, how Alan Rush just randomly in a cast this episode. This is also like the season I feel like for them just like blending like real world injuries into the set between whatever's going on with Larry Pine and then Alan Rush. I'm assuming real life injury, but yeah, let's talk about Tom, because Tom, oh man, it feels like it's so strange because the last 2 episodes were so Logan focused that like now it's like they feel like they're having to like compensate with like all these other characters. So, because in addition to obviously this being like a huge Kendall episode, this is a huge Tom episode. This is a huge Roman episode. This is a low key Connor episode. It's a low key Shiv episode. Greg, we'll talk about Greg, but and really what they're doing with him. But Tom gets the win of all wins in this episode because he finds out at the beginning he's not going to jail. And like,
that was great.
I don't know. Has there ever been a better instance of like just the slow track throughout until like just the explosion? Like, I don't know. I feel like there's never been like an explosion of just like emotion that way before on like any other show or like media property, where it's like we like characters fist bumping, cheering, like it's like he's avoided like the executioner's axe. Like he saw it like dangling over his neck, and then he just goes in. He literally has Greg get up and he just flips his desk and starts cheering like a madman. Like, oh my God. McFade, give McFade the Emmy. Seriously. Like, I didn't think you could top. I really didn't think you could top the I don't know if the sad I feel with you is more than the sad I'd feel without you moment from season 2 finale. But goddamn, this might be it, dude. This really might be it.
Greg, fuck your grandpa.
Tom, you're actually on speaker? Well, I shouldn't be, Greg. Just do an entire episode of just fucking Tom and Greg back. And then at the end, we get another one of those moments. We get another one of those moments at the end where they're walking through the tunnel of compliments, and Tom is on way too many drugs, and he's just like cursing out all the guys that are trying to throw him random compliments. And he's like, Greg, you ruined the moment.
Oh, that was the best fuck off of the entire series.
He's like, what did I do? And he's like, I don't know. You just did. You ruined the moment. And it's... Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
What about when that guy in the bush goes like, "You're the best," and he's like, and then
like, really?
Tom is like, "Fuck off," and Greg is like, "Thanks."
We're like, Greg is trying to play damage control between that. Like, I don't know. Like,
that was great.
Oh man, it was so. I don't know. What is it you think like set Tom off like against Greg at the end of the day? Was it just like the drugs? Like, was it like kind of like he was finally like burned out from like the high? Because I feel like it's so strange because like we've seen Kendall like on this high throughout the whole season. Like this one episode, we saw Tom just like somehow get even higher than that. Like on whatever drugs he was on. It was kind of crazy.
Yeah, I guess it was kind of like the drugs and the fact that like he was wrong about like Greg, getting a date with Dasha's character, and that's why he's really happy, Greg, after Kendall pretty much told him not to because he slimes his way into every situation, which he has a point.
Kendall did have a point. As fucked up as Kendall was in that moment.
Kendall was harsh, but Greg needed to hear that.
He did.
He needed to hear all of that. Because Kendall was like cool with him since the first season. Yeah, he was kind of sketchy around him, but at the same time,
Like, he could have been way worse. Now he's being full on douchebag to him because he kind of deserves it, Greg. Because he is Weasley, and then he tells him, "Oh, well, you're like the biggest fucking leech in America or some shit."
Well,
and
he's like you're like a human tapeworm or something like that.
Yeah. Which he kind of is.
Yeah.
And he's like, "I'm just joking." Or am I?
Or am I?
And Greg's like, I don't think you are, but okay.
Yeah. I love
Then
it.
he goes and just pokes at the Kendall as George Washington or whatever
vibration thing.
That was another weird thing in this episode. Just the images in the background of Kendall.
Yeah. It's interesting because this is another episode where this is the first episode where it's like, okay, Greg is finally actually having to deal with some consequences of his actions. Obviously, him and Tom both kind of avoided jail, and there seemed to be that red herring where it's like, oh, great, another just Greg skirting around and getting by the grace of God because he's the writer's favorite character and nothing bad can ever really happen to Greg. And the kind of the bulk of this arc, this episode was like, oh, I kind of just want to ask Dasha out on a date because she's cute. And the whole thing that happens at the end where it's like, yeah, they kind of agree mutually on the fact that Kendall's an asshole, and it's like, is that enough of an impetus? Just the fact that he's having them do a bunch of stupid shit. But at the end of the day, Greg, I'm so happy that kind of Kendall delivered that. So it was super harsh, and it was really kind of awful to witness in the moment. I don't know, it's so strange. I don't think I've ever talked this positively about an episode that left me feeling so hollow and empty at the end, because I feel like all the artifice in this episode that was on display here just completely, I feel exposed just the hollow nature of all of these characters. You just saw all of them at their bare bones, just most desperate and vulnerable, which is kind of crazy because they all technically won, well, except for Kendall. But you saw Roman, you finally got to see Roman acting ruthless after God only knows how many seasons of him kind of being coached, but then not really being given a chance to actually do anything. In this episode, he finally gets a win on his own, and Shiv is kind of just realizes that she has nothing and kind of just does what she can with it, which is just do a wild thing on the dance floor, which
was awesome.
It was, I don't know, this is low-key a highlight Shiv moment for me. Shiv is really coming around for me this season because she's finally, unlike Greg, seeing the consequences of her actions. But yeah, I love how Kendall kind of brought to light the fact that Greg is, because this is the ultimate conundrum with Greg, right? Greg is slowly becoming all of the things that the Roys are, that everybody hates about the Roys and everything that they do, right? He's becoming slimy, he's becoming Weasley, he's starting to manipulate things to our own advantage. The problem with him is that the writers are still trying to posit him as the likable character, as the guy who's just trying to survive, as the wily scapegoat, and kind of the clashing of those two things, it doesn't really mesh well, And so I guess you can make the argument that this is done by intention, and obviously we have 2 episodes left, so we still have yet to see how that's going to play out in the last 2 episodes. But it was creating this really weird friction where it's like, okay, is Greg out for himself? Is he on one side? Does he even know what he's doing? Because we were talking literally last week about it. Literally, it's like, okay, we don't know. Is Greg just a fucking idiot and have no idea what he's doing? And in this episode, it's it's brought to light and kind of thrown in his face, rightfully so, because he needs to hear it, because like James Cromwell said a couple episodes ago, he needs to find his own way, and he gets that by asking Comfrey out on a date, and they kind of relate in very strange circumstances, but at the same time, yeah, it was good. It was well needed, I'll say that.
Yes.
Yeah, let's talk about who we were waiting for all season to show up, right? Because you talked about him as far as you like it when this guy does more eccentric roles like this in Succession, so you do. Let's have the Skarsgard discussion. So I love how they do that thing where it's very similar to what they did with Brody a couple of episodes ago, where they have him pull I love how they're bringing in these celebrities almost as they're playing around with the nature of the celebrities that they have, right? And kind of showing it's yeah, Logan may be bigger than Logan, but Logan still needs to answer to these guys, right? And it's interesting because this is the first episode of the season where Logan really doesn't have that much screen time, right? He only has the one moment with the birthday card
in the beginning. Yeah.
And obviously the moment where they're set to meet with Mattson at the beginning of the episode, in order to discuss GoJo, and he doesn't even show up, and he just sends 2 of his guys. And Logan, obviously being the savvy businessman that he is, immediately recognizes this is a subtle FU to him. And Roman and Shiv are kind of able to successfully save the deal, even when he's like, oh, yeah, we should go back to Pierce. And they're both kind of what? after last season.
You're right.
Yeah. We sure that's a good idea? And they're able to posit this idea that, okay, he's going to be at Kendall's birthday party. We can just approach him there, And unfortunately, this leads to more kind of, oh man, I wouldn't even know what the term is for this. Like more not mansplaining, because like obviously that happens to her at the end, but like more like kind of, shoving Shiv to the side, and as far as like her kind of being incompetent. And like I love that, like, even though like it's done because like Logan clearly doesn't trust her and clearly doesn't trust her judgment in general, like Roman throws it at her. Roman kind of like uses the moment to like throw all of her insecurities about her feeling being left out because of her sex at her in the moment. And even though she knows it's bullshit, he's still able to like cut her and wound her in a way that like he really hasn't been able to previously. And it's, I don't know, it's so harsh and rough in the moment, but it still feels slightly justified because of, all the insults and barbs that you threw at him at the beginning of the season. Like this is the first season of the show where the constant insults are finally starting to cut deep. Which is interesting because this is a show that posits itself off of the insult humor. I don't know, like I don't know, like what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I loved how Roman ended up cutting loose, and then he ends up finding and kind of manipulating sort of like a relationship between him and Alexander Skarsgård, where it's like they can relate to certain they have kind of like similar attitudes. And just seeing Kieran Culkin kind of twist the wheel and then finally get that win for his dad in his own mind since that fucking space shuttles blow up. And, he could rub it in Shiv's face, and then Shiv doesn't really have anything, to say about it. And yeah, I love that it was sort of like a redemption for him, even though it's kind of like Roman at his worst.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting because Roman throughout the entirety of his run on Succession has constantly felt like the character that wants to be the bad guy but isn't actually, because as we come to find out, he's just way too damaged it feels like to do any actual harm. It feels like it's just constantly throwing everything up as a deflective shield.
Yes.
But the interesting thing, and I'm starting to understand now that we're like a majority of the way through the season, I'm starting to understand what Kieran Culkin was talking about with this season being more of a focus on Roman, because even though Roman obviously has kind of become like the number one boy in his dad's eyes this season, it's been very subtle and on the back burner in a way that it kind of wasn't with Kendall and Shiv for the first two seasons. And especially in the last two episodes when he didn't have as much screen time. But between the last episode with the victory with Justin Kirk, giving him a little bit of a confidence bonus, and now with this episode with the Skarsgård moment, right? It feels like just Roman is firing on all cylinders, and now because he's coming to his own, and now because like he's finally seemingly getting the respect and the validation from Logan that he's wanted, it finally seems to like be giving him the edge to like actually become like a true villain. Like this was like Roman's heel turn. Yeah, in order to bring wrestling terms into this. And it was kind of scary because like Kieran Culkin has been such a likable, and which is strange to say about any character on Succession, but he's been such a likable and kind of entertaining force on the show, just with the constant one-liners and the improvisational nature of his acting. And so this is not only just like kind of, not only a sudden left turn, but also like okay, like it's one of those moments where it's like, okay, this kind of like features a shift as far as like how the show is going to have longevity over the next two seasons, rather than just kind of repeating itself and spinning its wheels. It's like one of those TV moments that we love TV for, Yes. And I love like kind of the reflection of Skarsgård almost, because the thing about Skarsgård in this episode that I love is like it brings back some of the elements that I kind of fell in love with him as an actor about, like when I first saw him on True Blood, just kind of like the tall, looming, brooding guy, like it's been the thing I feel like that's been so dissatisfying and missing that a lot of people have misunderstood in their recent casting of him is they're constantly trying to make him, the love object, they're constantly trying to make him like, oh, the deconstructed thing, oh, the abusive spouse,
Yeah, exactly.
And it doesn't work. Like you don't cast Skarsgård in those types of parts, it's Skarsgård to me works so much better as a force. He works when he has minimalistic things to say, but not in like a way that they use him in Mute, where he just doesn't talk and they're trying to use him as like the sympathetic figure. Like that just doesn't work because like it goes so tangentially, like it's like oil and water. It doesn't mix with his nature. The fact that it's ironic that he played a vampire for 7 seasons of True Blood, and they bring, and like there's very clearly like some intentionality in that casting here when they bring him in, and he's kind of like lurking off to the side. You know, he's like 6'5", he towers over everyone else in the room, but he just kind of chills off to his own in the corner. He's brooding. He's like always the guy that's like, man, I'm not having any fun. You know, but he loves to like, you know, he loves to casually flex like every other character, but not in a way where it's like, oh, he just straight up says fuck you to everyone's face the way that Rob Yang did to Logan, to Kendall in the first season, right? And so I guess what makes it interesting is kind of like he almost like surprises himself when he because he's so clearly, he seems to be like introduces this other character that is just there to like be more of a defiance of the Roys, but he almost surprises himself when him and Roman are like able to find common ground. They just are casually able to talk about it. It's like, oh yeah, when is your dad gonna die? It's like, I don't want to deal with your dad, other than the fact that he's like nothing against him as a businessman, but just because of the fact that he's antiquated, and I'm only about like the new world and what's coming next, and like kind of like as like a representative of the satire of most tech billionaires and why they're so antithetical. And I feel like why so many people are alienated from them is the fact that they just have not respect, but just no like real like kind of use for the old world, the old analog world, which obviously is what Logan is mired in.
He's also into privacy pussy pasta.
That was awesome. Just when Kendall tries to come up with it to him and like kind of give him the warning, and like he just doesn't seem interested at all.
Yeah, I like Alexander Skarsgård when he's not like a full-on like. I liked him in Godzilla versus Kong, but like I don't like him when he's playing like a flat out bad guy or a guy who has to like scream like in every scene, like in Battleship. But like I hated him on Big Little Lies, but then I love him in like that John Michael McDonough movie, War on Everyone, Martin McDonough's brother.
Yeah, he's great in that.
Yeah,
Michael Pena of all people, two people you would never expect to be that good as like in a buddy cop.
Oh, you saw that?
Oh yeah, I watched it. I finally watched it like a couple of years ago, and I loved it. It was way better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, he's great in that movie, and he was interesting in Long Shot, and I just think he's a very interesting actor when you give him like a kind of like a quirky character, unlike like I like his brother more, and I like his father more as an actor. Obviously, they've had a lot of crazy cool roles too, but like I like Alexander Skarsgård. He's definitely proven that he has talent. That's for sure.
Yeah, especially considering that like just it looks like, and I love this already, is like obviously if you watch the promo for next week's episode, you already know that he already shows that he's like 3 steps ahead of the Roy. And I'm hoping, I mean, I don't know if this will happen, right? Because obviously with Succession, it really is a give and a take. You could have a character that could come back into the main fray. You could have a character that could just pop up randomly. Like, but I don't know why. Like, because of the fact that he's got 2 seasons on, I'm kind of secretly hoping that they could like bring Alexander Skarsgård back into the main fray, that he could become like a main cast member on this show for like the last 2 seasons. I don't think that'll happen, but it would be so cool because it looks like he's already like starting to screw around with Roman, and because Roman was just like such on like his little hot shit moment at the end of the episode where he's like, oh yeah, fuck Kendall, fuck Shiv, I'm the number 1 guy and I secured this deal. And when Skarsgård straight up tells him to his face, it's like, yeah, you can tell your dad that it's in serious consideration, but not that I've confirmed it, And I just love that too, because like when he notice how too like when they're pissing on whatever app it is that they're the Waystar app, that he's like, yo, sometimes I take it out just to watch the loading screen because of how much it sucks, because of how bad the software is. And he's like what's it called? And you can almost tell like when Roman like kind of low-key asked him, it's like, oh, so can I like kind of tell my dad that you're that you're in and that we successfully did it? He's like, he doesn't even look at him when he says it's like, oh yeah, you can buy it. And he's like, oh, because you're a genius. And he's like, yeah, I know. Like I love it, like the fact that like so much subtle acting without actually like really having to emote. That's the parts where Skarsgård is like on his feet. That's definitely, and like it's weird. I don't necessarily know if this is gonna like make waves at the Emmys, but like I already know that like the guest category this year between both male and female is gonna be it's gonna be like a battle royale as far as who they're gonna throw in, because there's so many different options. It feels like this season.
Got to get that coveted guest spot Emmy,
exactly,
a la Ray Liotta.
I mean, the fact that Cromwell only got it for season 2 when I personally thought that he should have gotten it for season 1, and like there was no recognition for Eric Bogosian, which was a crime in and of itself.
That's lame.
Yeah, but I wanted to use that as a segue in order to talk about, for me, like kind of one of the weird moments. Like it comes from like the best moment of the episode to me, which is when Kendall's like mentally and emotionally unraveling in front of everyone. And he's kind of like, when he tells Roman, he's like, "You're not a person." He's like, "It's okay if you want to hit me, you can hit me," but Kendall just doesn't. And then he like kind of casually taps him and he literally pushes him over. Like it's amazing. Like Kendall literally crumbles like a house of cards in front of them. And where he says it's like, GoJo was my idea. I wanted to talk to you about that because I'm like, was that supposed to be a reference to Walter? Like, are they trying to are they trying to what's it called? Are they trying to retroactively like get Walter like and then pretend like it never existed and think that it was GoJo? Is GoJo like another like instance in place of Walter? Is that their attempt to like fix Walter? I don't know. Like, cause I don't know what's your take on that? Because Walter is something that was a really weird instance throughout the first 2 seasons, right? Obviously, it was very clearly an instance of, okay, this was just in the pilot, and then as Jesse Armstrong and the writers were trying to figure out where the rest of the first season was going to go, and obviously, how the first half of the season goes as opposed to the second half of the season, and then with season 2, when that came out, how they were seemingly attempting to just get rid of all of the weak elements of season 1, Walter being one of them. Like, I don't know, like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think absolutely that it's kind of like a placeholder, and it was like, yeah, Kendall's kind of taking credit for the idea because that's what he wanted to do with Walter. I think
Right.
that's absolutely what it is. But I don't think he absolutely crumbles. I just think he's probably a little bit drunk and like Roman tapped him too hard. But I think he fucking bested him when they were talking. Just with that, you're not a real person.
Right.
You're not a real person.
Yeah.
You're just not. And which he really isn't.
He really
Roman.
isn't.
And like at least Kendall is kind of a real person, below all that fucking rich greed ego.
Right.
But like in Coke or whatever. Yeah, I think Logan Kendall is we didn't talk about that fucking birthday note.
Yeah, well, because that's the other thing too. It's the triple fold. It's the birthday gift. It's the GoJo thing, and the fact that like, oh wow, so they only came to my birthday parties that they could try to approach Mattson, and he tries to like forestall them with the whole treehouse bullshit, and then how Roman's able to get past that, and then the birthday card where Logan is literally telling him it's like, you've lost, and you've lost, collect what you can and get out now. And it's like, that is like kind of what sends him spiraling, where it begins obviously when he first opens the note and he shows it to Naomi, where it's like, wow, it's like, it feels like everything that I've tried to accomplish within the company, like kind of essentially like kind of the crux, the cornerstone of his entire arc was the fact that he was supposed to be CEO seemingly on a thing of merit, where he brought in this thing that was supposed to be kind of like Waystar's way into the future. That was kind of his signifying his emergence over Logan, and his failure on that, his failure with Walter, and how and how Lawrence Rob Yang kind of took advantage of him in that first episode is the linchpin, the ignition for this entire show, because it's what tells Logan what he needs to know, at least what he thinks in the first episode, that Kendall's not ready for this, which it felt like this entire thing was hinged on that. And now the fact that all this is happening at once, the Mattson thing, the fact that Logan now is attempting to essentially use Kendall's idea while bypassing him entirely, and now is attempting to just shut him out entirely to really like keep it all to himself. And the fact is like, wow, okay, so now you were originally going to get all this, now you get table scraps, collect what you can, have fun, good luck trying to ever actually come close to this sort of thing again. Like you sort of see like the reason for why Kendall starts to mentally unravel. It's like everything, his entire essentially kind of existence, his whole identity is just being ripped away from him and thrown away. Like it's kind of gut wrenching. I think that's part of the reason why like this is my favorite Kendall episode of this season, because it's bringing back to me all the elements that we kind of fell in love with about Kendall in the first 2 seasons that this season was almost seemingly doing away with, and kind of miring him in all this arrogance and this posturizing about how great he is and all these ridiculous stunts seemingly just in order to get clicks, in order to like kind of show off his identity outside of it. But like, I don't know, like it certainly feels like this is kind of like a come full circle moment for Kendall, if that makes any sense,
Yeah, do you think he's going to take that deal though?
Well, I mean, that's the big moment, obviously, is the fact that, so if we break it down logistically, right, we know that Kendall really doesn't have anything he left as far as like any actual claim towards the hostile takeover, right? Stewie and Sandy are kind of doing their own thing. they're on equal footing as far as, they have the board seats that they want. It's kind of like 50-50 on each of them. The papers, the cruise papers, are worthless now, essentially, since it kind of last episode kind of confirmed that there really wasn't anything in there. And he's fired Lisa, who, again, like, also kind of saw the writing on the wall just in general. Now you're seeing his social media people in general start to see the writing on the wall. It's like everything that he was seemingly attempting to do has kind of failed. Once again, just like Tom said last episode, I've seen you get fucked so many times, and I've never seen Logan get fucked. Once again, I don't necessarily know if it's through the grace of God or just through natural events or whatever. It definitely, I don't think, was because of any self-sabotage this episode, but there's definitely going to be some sort of a thing where there's a reason why Kendall's directly confronting Logan next episode, because he realizes that he's out of options. So,
and Naomi kind of wants him to take the $2 billion anyway.
Well, Naomi, well, that's what's interesting about Naomi.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you brought that up, because Naomi, I'm so glad, because throughout the entirety of this season, I've been wondering, why is this character here? Because Succession is not the type of a show. Succession is not the type of a show that is going to just bring in a random character just to have them there to be eye candy, And the fact that Naomi was there and she was hanging with Kendall, and I'm like, oh wow, he seems happy for the first time ever in his life, But this episode kind of solidified her role, which is that she is, and it's crazy to say about this show, she is probably the first character that actually doesn't have a selfish motivation. Where even Willa, who was a character that I really, really liked, her kind of like selfishness was kind of like starting to come through as well, where her whole thing is, I'm kind of low-key using Connor in order to bankroll my
plan,
like
you were saying before, she's sticking up for him. Yeah, but she's still getting fucking paid.
Oh,
okay?
for sure. For sure. If anything like that, it's her coming into her own, right? And there were some low-key moments with her last season with that too, obviously, with her coming up with the whole idea for Connor's eulogy for molester with
I guess
Uncle Mo with the whole thing, but Naomi's whole thing is like, she genuinely cares about Kendall. She genuinely does care about him. She genuinely wants to see him well. She understands that everything that he's been doing this season has been disastrous for him mentally wise, and she sees him unraveling this episode, and she just wants to see him do well, and she wants to see him do better, and she understands that all of his posturing and his constantly failing attempts in order to get back into the top spot at Waystar are bad for him and are only going to do him more damage in the long run. And if anything, it kind of makes it more tragic, because I feel like I don't know if Kendall's going to be able to let it go, is the thing. Because like I said, this episode established that this is literally his entire identity. And
I don't know how he could, though, because like, if you think about it, if he takes the $2 billion, how is he going to overthrow his dad?
Right.
How is he supposed to do that?
Right.
He's got to keep his mouth shut.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, if he takes the money, I mean, yeah, he gets $2 billion, but like at the same time,
right,
his dad still fucking wins.
Right, exactly.
So
and
like,
Kendall
doesn't want him to win anymore.
Right, and that's the thing, is that like, I still, the thing that I still can't figure out is, I don't know if Kendall, and I think that this is the thing, right, that has been the kind of the question of the season that was posed with the first episode, is whether Kendall did the thing at the end of last episode because he genuinely wanted to go to war and wanted to try and enter in a fight that he could win, or if it was just another example of self-grandirizing and self-posturizing, right? And so the problem that comes down here is Kendall, what's going to happen, I think, is Kendall's going to have to choose between Naomi and the company. And he's going to ultimately choose to continue to try and take over in some way, shape, form, or capacity. And he's going to lose Naomi in the process. And again, if the season goes the way that we think it is, where Logan dies and Kendall does find a way to take over in some capacity, you know, or if Roman, which it certainly seems like Roman is becoming the new Logan proxy, because that seems to be the thing that this season has been establishing first and foremost, that is going to be Kendall versus Roman, and he's going to lose Naomi. And it's crazy to me that like this one episode will be able to make this character, who again, we've barely spent any time with this season, we got to know a little bit last season, is able to make her kind of like the crux of Kendall's entire emotional stability. That's impressive to me, to say the least.
Dude, you know what? Another reason why I love this show is because you know what I thought was in that fucking envelope before he opened it?
What?
The exact opposite of what it was. I thought it was going to be a goddamn photo of the kid that died in the fucking season 1.
You know what's crazy? That wasn't even on my mind.
I thought it was. Like, as soon as Roman asked him, "Oh, is he going to like that?" I thought, and then Logan was like, I thought that was so indicating, like, oh, yo, he's just gonna bring up that dead kid from the fucking season 1.
Right.
And like I was gonna piss me off, and then it was the exact opposite. Oh, he's offering him money. Okay, like
Yeah.
I was so off. I was very happy about that.
It's interesting to say the least. And I think it's all completely well summed up in that final shot of just Kendall just lying on Naomi's lap and like just completely enraptured in that depression blanket, as I'm gonna call it, just completely and utterly broken in every capacity. And it perfectly is summed up, I feel, at the perfect, like, kind of come full circle, like realizing he's like, yeah, I'm 40. Like, I can't keep acting like a spoiled child anymore, you know? And you see it next week, you know, hair's coming off, head is shaved, you know, Kendall is Kendall going to take his last advantage, or is he going to, you know, ultimately crumble under the weight of his own hubris? Find out in next week's episode, the penultimate episode of Succession, entitled Shantyshire, where they're going to Lady Caroline's wedding. Lady Caroline is back next episode. We'll be back. We got 2 episodes left before we're done with our latest TV recap series. Wanted to thank you guys, all of you who've been watching us faithfully and dutifully each and every week. Dustin, where can the good people find you?
You can find me on YouTube, Mr. G Movie Reviews. You can find me on Letterboxd, Dustin Mason, and Twitter, Duster.
Absolutely. You can follow me at Movie Nerd Reviews on Facebook and Instagram. But of course, be sure to follow the podcast, Instagram and Facebook at Talkin TV Podcast on both Facebook and Instagram. Be sure to keep tuning in. We've got so much new content still coming out until the end of the year. Like I said, we just wrapped up our Talkin' Thrones run for 2021. The season 3 finale, Misa, is available to watch now. Be sure to keep tuning in for more episodes of that. We'll be back in 2022 for more episodes of that. I've got a couple more top 10 lists coming out this week. I've got a very interesting Soprano, by the time this episode goes up, I'll have my Sopranos top 10 deaths episode, top 10 list out. We'll have Succession characters next week, and we're going to have a couple more for you guys before the end of the year. And be sure to tune in. The House of Gucci is up. Our last 4 podcast episodes of the year come out in December. All that and more. You guys can stay up to date on that by clicking the subscribe button, clicking the like button, clicking the bell next to it. That way you guys get notified every time we put up new content. YouTube removed the dislike feature now, so now we don't have to worry about that anymore. Fucking YouTube and woke PC rules just in general.
That's so goofy.
It's so dumb. It's so dumb. 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next week. Penultimate episode.